Hey everyone, it's Aaron. I'm back with another video essay on some of your favorite motorcycles, and today I'm comparing the crowd favorite Royal Enfield Himalayan with one of its top competitors, the Honda CB500X. By the end of this video, you should have a much clearer idea of which is the right bike for you. And because I value your time, I'm gonna give you the too long didn't watch version right off the bat.
Both of these bikes are easy to ride, suitable beginner ADVs. They're both simple, reliable, and fuel efficient. The Himalayan is the bike to get if you're on a tighter budget, want to do a lot of riding off-road, and if you're looking for character. Spending extra for the CBX will get you a much better long-distance road tourer. Compared to the Himalayan though, it's tall, not that great off-road if you're a novice, and it feels kinda robotic.
And that's the long story short of it. Now, before we dive into the main comparison, I want to give a reminder that you should always consider the perspective from which the reviewer is coming from to see if the insights are aligned with yours, otherwise they might not apply. And in my case, my perspective is the same as many of you.
I was a novice level rider who wanted my first big bike to be an adventure tourer, something easy to ride and affordable, but capable enough for me to enjoy and grow as a rider on. I am average height at 5'7" or about 169 cm.
Let's also mention the bikes that I won't be talking about because I know you're gonna ask for them. First, we won't talk about any bikes below 400cc because in the Philippines, these bikes are not highway legal, which is a must for touring, especially if you live in Manila. So this disqualifies crowd favorites that you suggested in my last video, such as the the Adventure and the Hero X Pulse, and bikes like the BMW G310 GS and the Versys X. What about the KTM 390 Adventure? That's actually registered as 400cc here. This honestly would have been a perfect bike to include in this comparison, and it was for the longest time my choice for my first adventure bike and first big bike. But unfortunately, KTM Philippines never got back to me about a test ride after repeated tries, so we don't talk about them here. And besides, I heard from a number of friends about reliability issues and headaches with parts that are as expensive as BMW parts and take months to arrive. This should have been kind of the perfect middle ground between the CBX and the Royal Enfield Himalayan, but because I never got to ride it, can't make a fancy video comparison about it. Sorry guys, had to bring it inside because third world problems, the neighbor's dogs were making such a racket. But anyway, one more request. Do watch till the end of the video before you start any arguments in the comments because I just might cover your point before then. With that, let's finally get into it.
I won't go over the specs since you can look those up online, and I'll stick mainly to how the bikes ride in the real world. First, let's talk about price. Honestly, this was the primary consideration when I bought my Himalayan, as I'm sure it is for many of you. My second-hand 2020 Himalayan cost me 255,000 pesos, which is about 4,800 US dollars or 3.72 lakh rupees. Brand new here in the Philippines, it's now increased to 323,000 pesos, almost 6,700 dollars or 4.74 lakh rupees. A second-hand CBX, which is hard to find here, still costs close to brand new, which is now up to 380,000 pesos, about 7,200 dollars or 5.5 lakh rupees.
That is a big difference if you're on a budget, and that is the same price as a brand new Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 here.
Now let's talk about how they ride. I rode the CBX after having owned the Himalayan for a few months. Coming from the Himalayan, the CBX impressed me immediately with its peppy engine, flickability, and plush ride. My main takeaway from riding it is that it might be one of the best long-distance tourers in its class, an exceedingly agreeable mile muncher with its smooth engine, wide comfortable seat, good suspension, and excellent fuel economy. I was able to cruise at 130 kilometers per hour on the highway, occasionally speeding up to 140 when I felt like it. Like the Himalayan though, it actually gets quite vibey on the handlebars at 120. But unlike the Himalayan, which tops out at 130, you can still push it up to around 170. Comfortable cruising speed would be around 110 to 115 kph. The Himalayan is a good long-distance tourer as well, and also very good on bumpy roads. But I found the CBX more comfortable for extended distances with its better power and wider seat. Even after a 500-kilometer mixed on and off-road ride with it, I still felt comfy and fresh going home. The CBX is also great in the twisties, much more flickable than the Himalayan, with good power for shooting out of corners. The Bright Rider, in the only other thorough English comparison of these bikes on YouTube, makes a great point. He says that if you want to do round-the-world touring, basically in developing countries like Itchy Boots, the Himalayan would be a better choice because it's a bike that can be fixed most anywhere in the world and it can confidently handle bad roads in remote places. Not that the Honda is anywhere near as complicated as KTM's or BMW's, it actually has fewer riding options than the Himalayan, but the Himalayan is a tried and tested workhorse for these kinds of rides. When it comes to riding 2-up, based on reviews and my own impressions, the CBX is comfortable for extended tours with a Pillion as well. In contrast, at my height, I'm not comfortable for long periods as a passenger on the Himalayan. The Himalayan, in the meantime, is even more fuel efficient than the CBX. You can get over 30 kilometers per liter, but not if you ride it hard on the highway, in my experience. At that speed, the number gets closer to the CBX's at below 30 kilometers per liter, but you're doing it in more comfort on the CBX. Now, I know you'll say just to keep the Himalayan at 90 to 100, and you'd be right, but here, riding long distances with friends on faster bikes, I prefer to cruise at 120 even on the Himalayan, vibes and all. Notably, the CBX has the lightest clutch pull of any motorcycle I've tried. It's amazing when you first try it. It has an assist and slipper clutch, so the shifter is also very smooth and light. The Himalayan has a clunkier shifter, but honestly, I prefer this sometimes because with a big boot, I sometimes don't even notice that I've already shifted on the CBX. The CBX has a better front brake than the Himalayans, which is known to be pretty wooden, but I didn't find the rear brake on the CBX quite as good as the Himalayans. The 2022 CBX should have even better front brakes now that it has dual discs with Nissan calipers. Both bikes have the same listed curb weight, depending on which website you look at, but the CBX feels lighter, which I'm assuming is due to a lower center of gravity. I found it easier to move around in my garage than the Himalayan. Riding position is similar between the two bikes. Nice, tall, wide, and commanding. For me, the CBX wins a bit in having mirrors with an excellent wide view. I also found the wind protection better on the Honda.
Now, I hope you don't think I'm ragging on the Himalayan here. I mean, the CBX is the more expensive bike, in some countries much more expensive, so it should be better in all of these ways. And my purpose is to show you what you're getting for the extra money. That said, it's not a unanimous vote for the CBX in every category.
Let's get into seat height because this is one of the big factors to consider when choosing a first adventure bike. The CBX is tallish at 830mm or 32.7 inches, a full 30mm or 1.2 inches taller than the Himalayan. At my height, again 5'7", 169 cm, I already find I can't put a second foot down in traffic on the CBX without upsetting the bike's balance. I have to emphasize that if a tall seat height makes you uncomfortable and takes away your confidence at low speeds, then it's not gonna be much fun to ride, especially as a beginner. For me, the Himalayan is much easier for me to get both my feet down, which is a big thing with such a top-heavy bike. So it's easier for me to ride as a daily in traffic and gives assurance when paddling off-road. On that note, let's compare the size of these bikes. What I love about the CBX is it has a lot of big bike presence for its class. Up close, it looks and feels like a middleweight ADV. The Himalayan is a hefty bike as well, but maybe it's that lower seat height or the lack of a front fairing, it just makes it look smaller when the rider's a bit taller, like my 5'9" girlfriend, BB Moto. I know this has nothing to do with how it rides, but let's admit, many of us want our bikes to have a certain look and style. It's part of the pleasure of owning a bike. I personally like the styling on both bikes. One modern and beaky, and the other retro rugged. It's really just a matter of preference.
Now let's move on to the category where the Himalayan has the CBX soundly beat: off-road capability.
The Himalayan is renowned for being an all-roads, no-roads bike. That friendly, torquey engine, the higher ground clearance, and that big 21-inch front wheel allow you to tractor through anything, and the low seat height makes paddling easier. You don't need to be an expert to take this bike through some surprisingly gnarly stuff. You just have to trust the bike and tractor through without much clutch work. On top of that, the latest Himalayans have switchable ABS, which the CBX noticeably lacks, so more advanced riders can have more fun and brake traction. Now, the CBX is, first of all, taller, which intimidates novice off-roaders like myself. It also has mainly road tires. You can change them, but Tires aren't cheap, and we're talking about budget ADVs. It has a jumpier throttle too, which I found challenging to modulate on soft terrain like sand, similar to what they say about the KTM 390 Adventure. It's also lighter on the front and has a smaller 19-inch front wheel. So all of this combined, I think, resulted in some spills that I could have saved or avoided altogether if I'd been riding on the Himalayan. And I took a lot of spills. My friend Martin, who's a much better rider than me, found his stock XSR 700 on road tires easier to handle than the CBX on very fine sand.
It's not that the CBX can't go off-road. You can take any bike off-road. It's just that you can do it on the Himalayan with so much less special ability. Now let's move on to maybe the most contentious category, character.
Honda motorcycles have a reputation for being quote-unquote too perfect, too consistent, too refined, robotic, my friend calls it. The engine with a stock pipe actually feels so smooth and contained, if that makes sense, that I can barely hear it in traffic.
Oh, listen to this. It's just so bassy. The EQ makes it sound muddy.
Whereas the Himalayan is kind of this charmingly imperfect bike with its shortcomings almost being integral to its character, and the reassuring thump of its engine is a soundtrack a lot of people love. This is an intangible but significant aspect of the motorcycling experience. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Himalayan, being a bike that more people own in many parts of the world, has more abundant aftermarket parts options, so those who like to customize their bikes may find the Himalayan a better canvas.
So if all you care about is just purely how the bike rides, then hands down, I would pick the CBX. But the Himalayan is the Himalayan. It really has that romance of being able to ride in the actual Himalayas. It has that rugged charm, off-road ability, and affordability that make you want to really ride it hard and ride it everywhere and not just leave it in your garage. You might never go to the Himalayas, but isn't it nice knowing that you could?
Two bikes at two different price points for different kinds of riding. Long-distance touring, mostly on road, consider the CB500X. For off-the-beaten-path adventures and or if you're on a budget, the Himalayan.
Now, if this still hasn't convinced you of either of them, the other bikes to consider are again the KTM 390 Adventure. Great road bike, way more electronics for less money than the Honda CB500X. In India, you can still get the Yazdi Adventure and the Hero X Pulse. So many of you recommended that to me. In the Philippines, you can look at the Bristol Venturi 500, which uses the same engine as the CB500X, but it has GS styling and full luggage for 20,000 pesos less than the CBX. And I'm sure a lot of you have your experiences, your insights, and even your ideas for other alternatives to these two adventure bikes. So please do chime in the comments and let's all help each other who are trying to decide between all these bikes. So thanks as always for watching. Hit me with a like if you enjoyed this video. It really helps. And subscribe for more video essays like this and adventure vlogs on motorcycles, 4x4s, and all the adventures around the world. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.